Welcome to the Regional Conference on Nature-Based Solutions for Climate Resilient Urban Development. Thank you to the organisers for what looks like a fascinating event and for the invitation to chair this first opening session. I believe we are working in a number of languages, which is incredible, and I'd like to congratulate the team for their commitment to making this important work as accessible as possible. My name is Sarah Ransom, and since March this year, I have been the Partnerships and Impact Lead with the Australian Water Partnership. Prior to this, I worked on delivering the Australian Development Program with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and AusAid before that. I was lucky enough to be posted to Laos and Vietnam in that time. So it's wonderful to be back in the region, even if only virtually. Many of you would know that AWP is a Water for Development partnership supported by DFAT. AWP mobilises Australia's internationally recognised expertise in water management to meet the vital water resource needs of developing countries in our region. In doing so, we advance Australia's international development and foreign policy objectives. To do this, AWP draws on water expertise from over 220 Australian partners, of whom Water Sensitive Cities Australia and ISOM are two, and international partners such as the World Bank. Having just been involved in COP26 in Glasgow, it was really striking to me how much nature-based solutions have moved into the mainstream conversations about climate mitigation, adaptation, and sustainable development. This conference comes at an excellent time to progress some of these conversations from the big picture of, we know we need to have this in our toolkit, to the practicalities of, okay, how do we do it? Over the next few days, I hope there will be plenty of opportunities to grow collaboration as the 5 countries represented here share experience and learnings from nature-based solutions. The challenge is to move successful pilots to scale, but this is a shared challenge with shared opportunity on the horizon as we learn more about the benefits of well-designed nature-based solutions in urban settings. Now that's enough from me. I would now like to introduce our first speakers, Dr. Birgit Hansel and Miss Julia Feeney. Dr. Birgit Hansel has been the World Bank's country manager for Thailand since November 2018. Prior to this role, she was based in Manila as a lead economist and program leader for equitable growth, finance, and institutions for 4 Southeast Asian nations. She has broader experience in the World Bank's programs in Asia, Africa, and Europe, and has worked as a senior economist in the bank's global practice. Her PhD is from the London School of Economics, and prior to her time with the World Bank, she enjoyed an international academic career. Now, please join me in welcoming Birgit.
Good morning, Sawadee. Excellency, distinguished participants, colleagues, friends. On behalf of the World Bank, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this Mekong Regional Conference, Nature-Based Solutions for Climate Resilient Urban Development. The emphasis on resilient development is highly relevant as we face an unprecedented health and economic and social crisis brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. In East Asia, as you know, the pandemic has produced the sharpest economic contraction in the region since the Asian financial crisis. And for the first time in 2 decades, we are seeing a pause in the critical gains we have made in poverty reduction. And as a result, we now expect nearly 30 million people to remain poor or become poor in the coming years. That means they will be living on less than $5.5 a day by the end of this year. And this takes place against the backdrop of an ever-increasing challenge related to climate change and resulting natural disasters, as we could see across the region. And of course, we all remember the recent COP26 meeting, which showed how complex it is to find agreements to keep the expected global temperature rise below a 2-degree threshold. And we know that increasing temperatures and more extreme rainfall will heighten future uncertainty and risk, increasing the potential for more frequent, intense water-related disasters, including floods and droughts. And East Asia already accounts for about 70% of the world's total losses due to natural disaster. The recovery plans that many of our countries now embark on must really address this dual challenge on meeting climate change goals and addressing the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. And as countries in the region embark on their journey towards this recovery, they will need to adopt a green, resilient, and inclusive development. And this is what we call in the World Bank Group the GRID approach, which we coined and was approved by our board of governors, where many of your countries are represented. And the World Bank also has recently completed a new climate action plan, which provide a framework for bolder climate action in the region and around the globe. And this climate action plan aims to increase the World Bank's financing for climate adaptation to $50 billion over the next 5 years. And by making sound low carbon investments and tackling inequalities exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change, governments really have an opportunity to rechart their development trajectories and transform their economies so that they are more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. As you know, cities are major growth engines in all our countries, generating more than 80% of global GDP, while supporting the livelihoods of millions of people at the same time. And cities are also at the front line of the climate and COVID-19 emergencies. And although cities occupy only 2% of land area, they consume over 2/3 of the world's energy and account for over 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Thailand is the world's 21st most populous country with about 70 million people, and 9 million of them residing here in the capital, Bangkok. And across Thailand, about half of its residents live in cities, while the other half live in rural areas. And Bangkok's per capita CO2 emission is at 7.1 tons per capita, and is higher than those in other major cities, such as, for instance, London, where it's 5.9 tons, or Tokyo, where it's 5.7 tons. Also, as a low-lying country, Thailand could suffer more frequent flooding and droughts, affecting not just the cities, but also the rural areas. And we saw it quite recently here. And that includes, of course, the agriculturally important Mekong region. For example, the Mekong River recorded its lowest level in 2019 and in 2021 has seen widespread flooding across the Mekong River Basin and some areas of the Chao Phraya River Basin. So in addition to the loss of productive activities, the destruction of critical infrastructure negatively affects the well-being and opportunities of Thai people, especially vulnerable groups, and with that, increasing inequality. Evidence increasingly suggests that nature-based solution, that is, natural systems or processes used to help achieve societal goals, could contribute significantly to address some of our most pressing societal challenges, such as threats to water security, rising risk of natural disaster, or climate change. The World Bank Group is working with governments to integrate or enhance the use of nature-based solutions and other low-carbon considerations into national planning, policy, and investments. Our country partnership framework with the government of Thailand prioritizes climate change and improving water resource management. Knowledge sharing and technical discussions are an important dimension of our World Bank support here in Thailand, and we are very glad to be co-hosting this event. We really hope for an interesting and informative exchange, and the World Bank remains committed to support countries in the region for their green, resilient, and inclusive development. I wish you all a very successful workshop. Kapun Kap.
Thank you, Birgit, for your excellent opening remarks. Now I would like to ask Ms. Julia Feeney to speak. Ms. Feeney is the Australian Deputy Head of Mission to Thailand and has been based in Bangkok since July 2021. She is a Senior Career Officer with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and has recently held the position of Assistant Secretary Climate Change and Environment Policy Branch. She has previously held senior positions in Europe Division and with Australia's membership on the UN Security Council. And she has also had postings in UN New York, Belgrade, UN Geneva, and Nairobi. And now please join me in welcoming Julia for her remarks.
Sawadee ka. Thank you, Sarah. Morning, everybody. Excellencies online in Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam, senior officials, experienced practitioners, colleagues. The world's cities are growing rapidly and our climate is changing faster than most scientists expected even 5 years ago. The impacts of climate change are magnifying a range of challenges for countries around the world. Disasters and extreme weather events, such as drought, floods, cyclones, are adversely impacting livelihoods, critical infrastructure, and productive industries. For example, exposure to flooding is increasing among the countries in the Greater Mekong region. The impacts are magnified by long-term effects from climate change, such as threats to ecosystems, ocean acidification, sea level rise, and saline intrusion. Australia shares many of these increasing challenges with our neighbours. We are the driest inhabited continent, but we also experience regular flooding. Just 1 week ago, many communities on the east coast in Australia experienced severe thunderstorms and flash flooding. Australia is also one of the most urbanised countries in the world, and our urban centres are feeling the effects of climate change and other extreme weather events. For example, there are some places in Australia that have experienced floods, forest fires, drought, and now the pandemic, all in the last 12 months. DFAT's Climate Change Action Strategy states that addressing the risks of climate change, as well as taking advantage of the opportunities from climate action, such as more resilient economic growth, jobs, and technologies, reinforces sustainable development and supports poverty reduction. In this context, the need for climate resilient urban development is clear for our local communities, our countries, our region, our planet. The strategies and solutions that have served us well in the past, including big infrastructure investments, may not be cost effective or sufficient in the future. Innovation and collaboration will be essential to unlock opportunities that bring together nature, culture, and sustainable economic development. Scaling up and mainstreaming innovative green and grey technologies underpinned by sound governance, private sector activation, and genuine community engagement will all be important to create future communities and a region that is sustainable, healthy, and prosperous. Multidisciplinary collaboration can create a pathway to scaling these innovations. Collaboration between different levels of government can also accelerate the speed of the progress and the size of the impact. This conference aims to build on and expand collaboration within and between Thailand, Vietnam, China, and Australia as part of the Nature-Based Solutions for Integrated Urban Flood Management project. But the bigger picture to consider is climate resilient urban development. I take this opportunity to thank Australia's Cooperative Research Centre for Water Sensitive Cities and also Australia's International Centre for Environmental Management and the World Bank. We appreciate each of these partnerships. I also acknowledge the extensive cooperation for this work with our friends in China, Thailand, and Vietnam. Warm thanks to the lead government and practitioners partners in each place. Finally, I also want to signal Australia's intention to build on this positive collaboration and explore climate-resilient urban development partnerships in Cambodia and Laos in the year ahead as part of Mekong Australia Partnership. I wish the meeting conference every success, and I look forward to hearing the keynote address by Professor Tony Wong. Thank you all.
Now, we'll move to our keynote speaker, who is Professor Tony Wong. Now, before I briefly introduce him, and I know many of you would already follow his work, I would like to note that while Tony's presentation is pre-recorded, you're very welcome to use the chat function to ask questions. The conference team is ready to answer these. And in fact, I note that some of you have already used the chat to introduce yourselves, and I've been told that's very welcome too. Your comments and questions are really helpful to the team as feedback, which they can then incorporate into the program. Now to our keynote address. Professor Tony Wong pioneered the water-sensitive cities approach to integrated urban water management and has advanced new understandings. His work promotes the idea that nature-based solutions can be underpinned by creative design through blending biomimicry with engineering and architectural knowledge. He has received numerous prestigious awards for his work, which is increasingly being adopted and adapted by developing countries. Tony is a fellow of the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering and received the IWA Global Water Award in 2018. Thank you, Tony. We are really looking forward to hearing your keynote.
For your invitation for me to speak to you today. By way of background, I'm a civil engineer with a PhD in water engineering. Over the past 30 years, I've undertaken research and work in collaboration with urban designers and landscape architects to look at how we can integrate science and engineering into urban forms into landscape design. The area of my interest is working at this integration in cities. Throughout history, cities and towns develop by drawing upon ecosystem services in their environment. The resources needed for construction, potable water supply, receiving environment for our waste, the buffering of natural hazards associated with high wind, floods, sea storm surges, droughts, and so on. However, instead of working towards a healthy coexistence, our traditional development methods significantly replace the natural capital within the city footprint with technocratic solutions based around very narrow reductionist concepts of utilities. Floods are more severe. Urban heat island conditions are magnified. Land and water pollution becomes prevalent. These are examples of the consequential impact of this approach, and they have invariably reduced the resilience of our cities to natural hazards in our effort to control nature. This vulnerability is now exacerbated by climate change. As home to the majority of the world's population, it is increasingly recognized that the battle for sustainability will be won or lost in cities. Urbanization or urban renewal bring new investments, and this provide an opportunity to reset how cities operate. Cities are hybrid social technical environments, which are themselves serviced by hybrid systems. These hybrid systems combine existing infrastructure with flexible, decentralized local solutions. They merge conventional engineering with nature-based solutions. They can be integrated with urban systems for energy, waste, transport, housing, and food. In Melbourne, as in many cities in Australia, we are now harnessing the opportunity of urban renewal to transform the cities through adaptation and strengthening of existing infrastructure and systems. We are guided by the notion of introducing hybrid water solutions, the significance of digital technology to enable us to manage in real time the operation of this infrastructure, and the introduction of a circular economy in the way we look at water, waste, and food. Our concept that infrastructure systems are hybrid has many dimensions. It's hybrid because it requires both a social and technical approach to achieving its best operation. Social in terms of policy, in terms of co-creating through different institutions of their infrastructure, co-investment and cooperation. Hybrid in terms of its blending of centralized and decentralized solution. Hybrid because of its grey and green infrastructure and integration. Hybrid also because it promotes both public and private sector investment. It promotes the vertical integration of government from federal government, state government, and local government. And finally, it's hybrid because it involves community participation in its design and planning. Water has a direct impact on the resilience and livability of cities. The concept of ecological landscape is a useful description of ecological functioning landscapes that embeds ecosystem services into the built environment and the public realm. Our knowledge of traditional values of open space and landscape features need to be bolstered with an understanding of these ecological functions, of the urban landscapes that capture the essence of sustainable water management, microclimate influence, facilitation of carbon sink, and the use for food production. We approach this with the concept that cities can provide ecosystem services. We do that through embedding ecological landscapes into the public realm in our cities. These ecosystem services include water quality improvement of stormwater runoff that's discharged from the cities, the management of stormwater as a resource, buffering aquatic ecosystems from the effect of catchment urbanization and climate change, flood mitigation through the facilitation of infiltration, detention, and harvesting, and of course the safe passage of floodwaters through natural ecological corridors. The influence of urban microclimate through shading and evapotranspiration, and ultimately enhancing the urban ecology of biodiversities. These are the type of ecosystem services that we can embed into our urban design and public realm. While there have been many studies undertaken over the last 30 to 40 years on the effectiveness of nature-based solutions for water quality cleansing, including wastewater treatment, it was only in the last 5 years that the concept of nature-based solutions for environmental management has taken prominence. In 2018, the UN Water and UNESCO published a report on nature-based solutions for water, advocating that it is time for us to re-examine nature-based solutions to help achieve water management objectives. It was stated in the report that there's an opportunity now to introduce nature-based solutions to complement aging or inappropriate or insufficient grey infrastructure to further strengthen the resilience and livelihood of communities. The use of nature-based solution is not confined to large-scale natural capital protection or restoration. The report by the United Nations have in fact provided the motivation for many cities to re-examine how their city infrastructure are being delivered and how they could consider introducing or greening their cities by embedding green infrastructure into the cityscape. Restoring natural capital and harnessing their ecosystem services involve multiple dimensions. The concepts of nature conservation, restoration, rehabilitation, and biomimicry apply in one way or another. When we're looking at large-scale natural capital conservation, such as the reforestation of agricultural land, the protection of large natural wetland systems, the concepts of nature conservation and nature restoration frame those activities. As we move closer to urban environments, efforts to re-establish mangrove swamps or to prevent erosion, stream bank erosion and coastal erosion. A more suitable framework is that of nature restoration and rehabilitation. Rehabilitation in that we are not trying to re-establish pristine environments, but to create an environment that would coexist with the change in land use associated with urbanization and urban development. In an urban environment, the concept of nature-based solution is much about nature rehabilitation and biomimicry. Rehabilitation in protecting natural systems within the urban environment to enable it to coexist with the change in land use, and biomimicry in terms of how natural systems and processes can be embedded into urban architecture and the public realm. This latter concept is the one that I'd like to discuss further in this presentation. There are many examples of the implementation of ecological landscapes in global cities and towns to enhance the ecosystem services that they provide, including for flood protection, for enhancing the microclimate, and through that the livability of the citizens in those cities and towns, through the introduction of ecological landscapes for safe flood passage through corridors and connected parklands within the cities, through very clever urban design and biomimicry to improve the cleansing of stormwater runoff, and through that the use of stormwater as a resource. These opportunities and benefits are not confined to the developed world. In fact, many cities in the developing world have this unique opportunity to leapfrog over many of the trials and tribulations that cities in the developed world had to go through to get to the water sensitive state that they aspire to be in. Included in this ability to leapfrog is, of course, our ability to adapt concepts of ecological landscapes and water-sensitive urban design to strengthen the resilience for the urban poor. The growing urban poor community, especially in many of our developing cities, face a significant challenge that are incredibly fundamental. Fundamental in terms of their access to safe water, their access to safe sanitations, their protection from just your everyday flooding, all impact on the livelihood, the quality of life, and overall health of these communities. In a slum area in the city of Makassar in South Sulawesi in Indonesia, we have examined how we can introduce ecological landscapes for flood protection and for providing safe sanitation. This slum area currently do not have any wastewater management and greywater management and is subject to frequent flooding throughout the year. Our solution of ecological landscapes in this case prioritized on two key things: providing flood-proof access to the dwellings of the people, and also to provide safe sanitation through a decentralized wastewater treatment system using constructed wetlands. As you can see from the series of slides here, that we were able to blend into a very dense urban environment the ecological landscapes that are required to deliver this ecosystem service. The ecosystem services I've described are prevalent in many global cities initiatives. such as the low impact development initiatives in the United States, water sensitive cities in Australia and in Europe, the ABC waters in Singapore, and of course, Smart City in China. The concept of embedding nature-based solutions into urban landscapes, into the public realm, is based around ensuring that the scientific and engineering community can provide technical input to the sizing and the location of these systems. What I'd like to do is to present to you some of the tools that the scientific and engineering communities would use in influencing the sizing of these systems. In Australia, for example, we undertake a series of modeling to simulate the process of urban runoff during a rainstorm and the pollutant loads that's generated from an urban land use that would be discharged into rain gardens or constructed wetlands, and the resulting outflow and reduction in contaminants before that water is discharged into the waterway. That provides the basis for us to size these systems to meet local requirements as far as compliance in peak flow reduction as well as pollutant load reduction. Similarly, we now have models that are able to model the effect of keeping water in the landscape on urban temperature in our urban environment. Water has the influence of promoting evaporative cooling in our cities through evaporation of water bodies and also through evapotranspiration through our greening strategies. This knowledge helps us to understand the influence of shapes and size of open water bodies as well as vegetation density and canopy cover. In relation to tree canopies, there are also models that we use to model the influence of urban canyon, narrow streets bounded by tall buildings compared to wider streets where tree canopies can be a lot more effective in influencing microclimate. These models help us to understand the configurations and the form of urban greening that we could introduce in delivering the type of ecosystem services that we aspire. Our ability to value the economic benefits of hybrid green and grey infrastructure across a number of beneficial outcomes is vital in how we could facilitate and foster greater integration of this infrastructure and to foster greater co-investments across different sectors. As we strive to harness the multiple benefits associated with hybrid infrastructure, we need to adopt a whole-of-government approach in our design and investment of this infrastructure. In addition to the technical innovations that we have seen today, it is just as important for us to think about the institutional and macroeconomic policy reforms to support the implementation of hybrid infrastructure. It is also necessary for us to get a broader understanding of the economic value of these benefits, to move from a very narrowly financial-based valuation of our projects to a broader economic-based valuation. There are tangible and intangible economic values. If we were able to quantify that, we would provide the foundation for co-investments because we would have greater clarity on where the beneficial outcomes could be connected to different government departments, different private sectors, and therefore a clearer pathway to enable co-investments and cooperation of this infrastructure across government as well as between the public and the private sector. And therefore, in conclusion, I'd like to reiterate the great opportunities of global cities and towns to commence their transition into more sustainable, resilient, livable places. The role of nature-based solutions in creating hybrid infrastructure has provided us with the opportunity of delivering multiple functions across a whole spectrum of ecosystem services, from flood protection to managing our cities as water supply catchments, to improvement of the quality of the water environment and the quality of our green spaces in terms of providing enhanced microclimate mitigations. All of this can be delivered through the way that we foster the institutional and policy settings. To do that, not only do we need to have the technology and the capability to simulate and predict the performances of those technology, we also need to ensure that it is well grounded through a very rigorous economic valuation process. I can't state enough the importance of drawing your attention to the subtle difference between economic valuation in the benefit cost analysis compared to a financial valuation. Economic valuation is much more profound and provides the basis for integrating across sectors in the departments, in our governments, as well as across the private and public sectors. Our ability to derive and quantify the economic value will provide a sound basis for co-investments across all stakeholders. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present today, and I wish you well in your two-day forum.
Thank you very much, Tony, for your wonderful keynote presentation. I think we have a couple of minutes before we need to move on to the next part of the program. So I wanted to highlight that a question came up in the chat for Tony, and I wondered if he would be kind enough to answer that one. The question is from Katharine Cross, and her question is, in relation to ecosystem strengthening resilience for the urban poor, the implementation of nature-based solutions happens in a social context. How can urban greening and green infrastructure be undertaken in a way that does not exacerbate existing social inequalities? Tony, could I ask you to respond to that?
Sure. Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you, Katharine, for your question. And in some sense, there is no straight answer to it other than that in many cases, access to nature-based solution would in fact balance out the type of inequality we see today in terms of the urban poor not having access to the most basic of infrastructure services. You know, the notion of water supply and safe sanitation as a foundation. Nature-based solutions actually provide a means of improving the quality of the environment through better wastewater management and better water quality improvement in and around the environment where the urban poor lives. So I think that we often think of urban greening as the domain of the growing middle class, while in fact, a lot of the work we're doing now have shown that the way we adapt our knowledge to be implemented in urban poor environment can be successful. It tests really the quality of the urban design to embed those ecosystem services into very difficult environment. And the experience we have over the past few years now working in slum environment certainly has given us great confidence that we can adapt our knowledge of nature-based solutions into those really difficult environments for flood protection, for cleansing of water quality, and perhaps for protection of local water supply systems such as groundwater systems in our wells and so on. So I think that no longer is greening cities and nature-based solution seen as something for the growing middle class. In fact, it is perhaps a pathway to lift often the forgotten poor to increase concurrently with the development of cities. And through that, following the aspirations of leaving no one behind.
I will now hand over to my colleague, Dr. John Dore, who will chair the next session. John is Lead Water Resources Specialist for Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. He's based in Bangkok and works across Asia. He's involved in many of Australia's bilateral and regional engagements in water-related government-to-government partnerships and alliances with industry and civil society. Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, it was a pleasure for all of us to listen to Tony's address, but we now move to a high-level panel. So let me introduce all of the panel to you before we get started. Our first speaker will be Dr. Phirun Saiyasitpanich, Secretary General of ONEP with the Government of Thailand. Dr. Phirun is an environmental engineer with a PhD in that topic from the University of Cincinnati. ONEP has guided the work in Thailand over the last 18 months, and Dr. Phirun has been an outstanding chair. So we thank he and his team today, and we look forward to hearing more from them through the event. The second speaker we are fortunate to have will be His Excellency Chann Sinath from Cambodia. Excellency serves as Under Secretary of State for MORAM and is renowned as a committed water leader, serving Cambodia and leading initiatives across the country. Our third panelist will be Mrs. Letty Thu Ha from the Institute of Urban and Rural Planning, Ministry of Construction in the Government of Vietnam. Mrs. Letty Thu Ha is a very experienced professional, and we look forward to her remarks. Our fourth panelist will be Mr. Vilakone Maniphousay. Sabaidi, sir. Mr. Vilakone is from the Lao PDR's Department of Climate Change in the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. And finally, our fifth colleague offering remarks is Dr. Marcus Wishart from the World Bank in Beijing, but also very familiar with Mekong countries and busy working here. All five have different remarks and angles they would like to offer us, but we will look forward to hearing from all of them. To begin with, I'd like to ask our organisers to click me through to Dr. Phirun. Thank you.
Dear Dr. John Dore, Lead Water Specialist, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Sawasdee krap. On behalf of the Office of Natural Resources and Environmental Policy and Planning, it is my honor and great pleasure to join this regional conference on nature-based solutions for integrated urban flood management. I would like to take this opportunity to express my appreciation for the kind invitation from Australian government and the World Bank. The event is timely organized and beneficial as the member countries of Mekong region came together to solve urban flooding by integrated nature-based solutions. Distinguished participants, in 2021, Thailand was ranked the 9th highest risk country affected by the long-term impacts of climate change. These risks included the continuing increase of average temperature, the increase in average precipitation in the rainy season, and the decrease in the length of the dry season, which made natural disasters such as floods, droughts, and storms become more severe and more frequent. These adverse effects jeopardize major economic sectors such as agriculture, tourism, and industry. During the past 20 years, the country has been hit by 137 natural disasters, the worst of which was the Big Flood in 2011. This flood accounted for 87% of the past total damage and was estimated to cause damage and losses of approximately $46.5 billion by the World Bank. Being aware of such serious circumstance, in COP26 at Glasgow, Thailand's Prime Minister emphasized that Thailand has put climate action as top priority and presented Thailand's active efforts. The Prime Minister announced Thailand's ambitious target to reach carbon neutrality in 2050 and net zero greenhouse gas emissions in or before 2065 to urgently tackle this issue. Thailand's biocircular green economy model was also highlighted as the pathway towards paradigm shift and environmentally friendly economic development that Thailand will pursue during its role as APEC host next year. Ladies and gentlemen, in response to climate change challenges, Thailand's vision for national development is articulated on building sustainable growth based on a climate-friendly economic society in national policies and plans such as the national strategy, the master plan under national strategy, the national reform plans, the 12th and 13th National Economic and Social Development Plan. Thailand has set the priority of climate change adaptation as equally important as mitigation. This is proven by Thailand's Climate Change Master Plan 2015 to 2050, which regards adaptation as one of the three main strategies among mitigation and enabling environment. In addition, climate change adaptation is the key component in the nationally determined contribution. As such, the National Adaptation Plan has been formulated aiming to minimize risks and improving resilience of the country to the adverse impacts of climate change in accordance with, for instance, the sufficiency economy philosophy, sustainable development pathway, and ecosystem-based adaptation, or EBA. The NAP was developed with the consideration of the national context and circumstances. The vision of NAP is Thailand is resilient with adaptive capacity to climate change impacts and moves towards sustainable development. The three missions under NAP was first to build climate resilient development by enabling the integration of climate change adaptation guidelines and strategies in all sectors at all levels. Secondly, to strengthen capacity and awareness of development partners at all levels to implement policies and plans on climate change effectively. And third, to develop databases, research, knowledge, and technology to support climate change adaptation. Moreover, guidelines and measures under NAP provide a framework for climate change adaptation actions and a foundation to support relevant agencies to take actions. They are divided into 6 key sectors, which are water resource management, agriculture and food security, tourism, public health, natural resources management, and human settlements and security. Distinguished guests, the ecosystem-based adaptation or nature-based solution have gained the popularity as effective solutions to address climate change crisis. This concept is identified in the NAP, not only in the principles, but also in the measures under 3 sectors: water resources management, natural resources management, and human settlements and security. Examples of EBA measures are to develop ecosystem-based adaptation for water resources management in watershed level, to establish criteria for coexistence between humans and forest, using ecosystem-based adaptation to reduce forest encroachment for monoculture farming, and to promote reciprocal farming and animal husbandry with forest ecosystems, to develop additional green multi-use spaces that are connected with the city as well as to nearby areas to mitigate the impact of flash flooding, reduce the temperature in cities, increase airflow, and to be used as evacuation and refuge spaces. Thailand has also implemented some NBS measures on the ground, which can be seen from the best showcases of Chulalongkorn University Centenary Park and Benjakiti Park. Chulalongkorn University Centenary Park was opened in 2017 with the vision to demonstrate the full benefits of multifunctional green space The park contains the largest green roof in Thailand and harnesses the power of gravity to collect, treat, and detain water to reduce flooding in the surrounding area and protect against a 50-year average recurrence interval flood event. It consists of constructed wetlands containing local species and a large retention pond to ensure no water is wasted, with rain and roof runoff circulated for park irrigation. 300 varieties of plants and trees are grown, and the multifunctional space is integrated with outdoor classrooms. The Benjakiti Park was opened to the public in 2004 as a tribute to the Queen Mother Sirikit. With a total area of 9.8 hectares, the park comprises a large lake surrounded by a forested area, an outdoor recreation space, a steel walkway, bicycle lane, and a parking area. In October 2020, Phase 2 and 3 of the Benjakiti Park was initiated with the aim of transforming the landscape and disused space into a green zone fitting with Bangkok's original habitat. The park was designed to be a giant sponge in the city center that can absorb up to 120,000 cubic meters of water during the rainy season and provide sufficient moisture in the dry season. In this connection, it will help to mitigate both flood and drought problems. In addition, several sustainable solutions for park maintenance are proposed, including solar cells to provide lighting and a water turbine. Covering a total area of 41.4 hectares, the project is expected to be completed by the end of 2021 and open to the public in 2022. This case study considers opportunities to add further value to the significant benefits offered by the measures already planned for the Benjakiti Park. Projects like these position Thailand as a pioneer in Southeast Asia for its use of nature-based solutions as part of the future city and climate resilient thinking. Progress is being made, but of course, there is still more to be done. Ladies and gentlemen, Thailand is pleased to be part of this project that aims to harness and utilize the power of nature to manage urban flood in the Mekong region in a cost-effective manner. Moreover, we welcome the opportunity to collaborate and share experiences with our neighboring countries to utilize ecosystem services to protect our societies and economy from the threat of climate change. ONEP is honored to be appointed as the main responsible agency in Thailand to implement this project. We look forward to taking active participation in this conference, including sharing our local experiences and learning innovative international examples. We believe that this project will support wider and smarter application of NBS in flood management in our region. Last but not least, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the Australian Government, World Bank, Cooperative Research Centre for Water Sensitive Cities, and International Centre for Environmental Management for your support, and look forward to a successful outcome that will enhance global transition to a climate resilient society. Thank you for your attention. ขอบคุณครับ
Thank you, Dr. Phirun. I am hoping I'm back online. Right. So yeah, thank you, Dr. Phirun, and thank you to all of the agencies in Thailand who have worked together really well to sort of help us all learn what Thailand is sort of experiencing. And that extends not just in Bangkok, but also to the municipal authorities in Rayong, who you'll be hearing more from through the event. Colleagues, it's now my pleasure to thank in advance Excellency Chann Sinath for joining us. We really appreciate it, sir. We would welcome hearing from you your reflections on what this topic of nature-based solutions and climate resilient urban development does mean for Cambodia and what it might mean in the future. Also welcome any reflections you have after hearing from Professor Wong earlier as to how some of his ideas and his team's ideas may be of interest to Cambodia going forward. But again, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to your remarks, sir. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. John Dore, for the floor. Thank you very much for the invitation from the Australian government to this conference. We determined this venue on the NBS, nature-based solution for the urbanization development plans and development plan for other sector. This is very important. And thank you very much for all arrangement, especially a very comprehensive note from Professor Tony and our colleague researchers of Thailand for a case studies of time. As you may understand, Cambodia include 27 towns and city. The most beautiful among the other world cities. Our territory covers 181 certified square kilometers of our land. Border by Thais, Vietnam, and Laos. Very fortunately, the Mekong Basin come across our country before go to the sea. The discharge 5 billion cubic meter. And around that, we have our river basin region into 5, from the upper parts of the Mekong, the Great Lakes, and the Mekong Delta, and the Tonle Sap, and the coastal corridor. When you introduce, I could call the NBS, nature-based solution or resolution. That is a very funny methodologies of Australia introduced to us. Today, the government invests a lot of effort and the resources to go for this. In particular, is the urbanization plan done by our government because of the climate change impact a lot to our country. As the water resources governor of the Kingdom of Cambodia, we always focus on the flood, drought, and the caution of the typhoon. And the impacts of the typhoon. Cause a lot of flood, drought, and other damage. That's why we, as I said, invest our resources to go for the future. Now you discuss on the nature-based solution. These are very required. And Professor Tony just said a lot related to this. And we do believe that Australian government is among the other donors working with us effectively on this area, especially through the Mekong Foundation, the DFAT. And we hope in our country partnership strategy from 2021 to 2024, and based on the Cambodia Operational Plan, Business Plan, 2021 to 2024, will reduce the flood, drought, the positive impact from the typhoon, and conserve our wetland, our green space, enhance the qualities of the waters and the contamination. In order to do this and how to do this, I may invite Mr. Paul, the advisor to the Ministry of Water Resources and Meteorology. He's the second team leader of the Irrigated Agriculture Improvement Project, to share a few. Please, Paul, the floor is for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency, and welcome to the new colleague, but I will have to invite your remark to be quite brief, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, Paul, please.
Understood. So basically, I will take a few slides. The urban planning and nature-based solutions. And I will go through 3 cases. Issues of Jakarta, main issues, the rapid urban growth. Second issue, yes. So the land subsidence. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Yeah. So land subsidence, very important. In Jakarta, they started building a seawall, but already after 4 years, the sea level was at the top of the seawall. So land subsidence is the main cause. And a real no-regret scenario for many cities is just to stop the land subsidence. Of course, you need a good water management. Influence of the sea, influence of the rivers, to solve the flood problems. So in Jakarta, they included mangrove forest management as one of the key nature-based solutions. Of course, in Tony's presentation, it was clear there are many more things to be done. So in the Manila Bay Sustainable Development Master Plan, which is a quite complicated one, and it includes 6 groups of measures, I just want to talk about basically reduction of flooding. Well, again here, the urban area growth is expected to be very strong, and that has big consequence. First of all, land subsidence, again, plays a major role. And needs to be solved. If we look at the measures to reduce exposure to flooding, basically what we need to do is to have a managed retreat in the case of the northern part of Manila Bay, and then based on a combination of gray and green, so dikes and nature-based solutions, in particular mangrove. The northern part of Manila Bay traditionally was always a mangrove, but was reclaimed. And basically that has to be converted again into mangroves, restoring natural habitats, adding also green to the cities. And since the cities are growing very fast, it's also an opportunity, because the new city, Manila area, is going to double more or less in 40 years. The new city can be designed with all the ecosystem services that Tony also mentioned in his keynote speech. So yeah, what are the lessons basically for Cambodia and for Phnom Penh as the major city in particular? Well, land subsidence really needs to be taken into account. Otherwise, we will get big problems here. The city here also is growing fast, and we should manage urban growth. Let's design the new areas as a sponge city. This concept which was originated in China. And there are many ways to do that: dual purpose parking and storage of water, permeable roads to infiltrate rainwater, detention of rainwater before flowing out, greening the city, giving room to the river by making parks alongside the river and use that as emergency flood space. Yeah, these are concepts, as also mentioned in Tony's keynote speech, which are needed, and especially needed for the new areas. Other issues that we can see is that it's important to reduce the floating debris in drains and rivers, because during peak floods, they will block the flow when they are stuck against the bridges, and that can cause serious floodings. So yeah, what we really need is an integrated city water management plan, urban plan, and ecosystem services plan. These are just the keynote's conclusions also from Tony, and I can only support in that sense his keynote speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Paul.
Thank you. Thank you very much for an excellent intervention. Very much appreciated. So far, we have heard some of the examples that Tony included in his presentation, followed by Dr. Phirun. Very helpful remarks from Excellency Sinath, and then bringing the relevance back to Cambodia. But it is now my pleasure to travel to Vietnam. And may I invite Thu Ha to offer us some reflections from her experience in Vietnam. And again, I encourage you to include in your remarks some reflections on what you heard from Tony Wong. Thank you.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn. Vâng. Trước khi nói về cái hệ thống đô thị Việt Nam và quy hoạch đô thị ứng phó với biến đổi khí hậu, thì với tư cách là một kiến trúc sư quy hoạch đô thị thì tôi xin nói qua về đại dịch Covid trước, bởi vì khi chúng ta phải ngồi đây và họp qua Zoom không được trực tiếp gặp mặt, thì tôi càng thấy rõ cái tầm quan trọng của quy hoạch đô thị về việc kiến tạo các không gian sống chống chịu và thích ứng với thiên tai, với nhân tai, với biến đổi khí hậu. Đó là việc kiến tạo những không gian trong nhà và ngoài nhà thông thoáng này, giãn cách này, nhiều cây xanh, luân chuyển không khí, ít dùng máy lạnh, vân vân. Lưu giữ khơi thông nước, tuân theo các quy luật thuận thiên của tạo hóa, và tất cả những cái đó chúng ta có thể thông qua các biện pháp về quy hoạch làm cho một cái đô thị trở nên đáng sống hơn, khỏe mạnh hơn và sức chống chịu cao hơn. Và nhân tiện đây thì tôi cũng xin giúp chúng ta cũng như là cái hệ thống đô thị của chúng ta luôn luôn khỏe mạnh và dẻo dai, cũng chống chịu tốt ở trong cái giai đoạn này ạ. Vâng, quay trở về phát triển cái hệ thống đô thị của Việt Nam, ngoại trừ năm 2020 bị ảnh hưởng bởi Covid, thì trong giai đoạn vừa rồi thì kinh tế Việt Nam đã tăng trưởng rất là nhanh, và kinh tế Việt Nam tăng trưởng nhanh thì đã thúc đẩy cái quá trình đô thị hóa diễn ra rất là mạnh mẽ. Theo số liệu mới nhất tháng 10 năm 2021, tức là một tháng trước thôi ạ, của Cục Phát triển Đô thị Bộ Xây dựng Việt Nam, thì hiện nay Việt Nam có 870 đô thị, trong đó có 2 đô thị loại đặc biệt, 22 đô thị loại 1, 32 loại 2, 48 loại 3, 89 loại 4 và 677 loại 5. Tỷ lệ đô thị hóa năm nay, năm 2021 thì đạt khá là cao là 40,5%. Vâng ạ. Trong chiến lược tăng trưởng xanh quốc gia của Việt Nam hiện nay là đến năm 2030 và vừa được chính phủ chúng tôi ban hành vào tháng 10 vừa rồi, thì không thể không nói đến tầm quan trọng của hệ thống đô thị như chúng ta cũng đều biết, bởi vì là hệ thống các đô thị Việt Nam cũng như các nước trong vùng đều đóng góp đến hơn 70% GDP toàn quốc. Riêng người Việt Nam thì tăng trưởng kinh tế ở khu vực đô thị thì đạt 12 đến 15%, tức là cao gấp 1,5 đến 2 lần so với mặt bằng chung trong cả nước. Và như vậy thì khu vực đô thị đã đóng góp một phần quan trọng trong việc giải quyết nhu cầu việc làm, tăng phúc lợi xã hội, tạo động lực tăng trưởng chung cho từng vùng đô thị và đến cả quốc gia. Tuy nhiên chúng ta đều đã biết là các đô thị tiêu thụ nhiều tài nguyên và thải ra nhiều chất thải và tác động đến môi trường. Cụ thể ở đây các cách thức hiện nay đối với các phát triển đô thị bền vững và ứng phó với biến đổi khí hậu tại Việt Nam chúng tôi là tôi xin trình bày của một cách cụ thể ạ. Sự hình thành và phát triển đô thị đang còn thiếu kiểm soát, năng lực cạnh tranh không cao, chất lượng đô thị còn yếu mặc dù số lượng thì nhiều. Vâng, và đôi khi nhất là tại các đô thị vừa và nhỏ thì đô thị chưa thể hiện được vai trò tạo động lực tăng trưởng kinh tế cho từng vùng, mà còn một số đô thị lại mới chỉ đảm nhiệm về cái chức năng hành chính thôi. Vâng, sự phát triển hạ tầng đô thị còn thiếu đồng bộ, chưa đáp ứng nhu cầu phát triển kinh tế xã hội cũng như là các nhu cầu của người dân. Thì do đó nó diễn ra tình trạng ách tắc giao thông, rồi ô nhiễm môi trường, ngập úng ở đồng bằng sông Cửu Long thì nước bị nhiễm mặn, sạt lở đất ven sông ven biển, mà như các quý vị đã biết thì Việt Nam có đường bờ biển dài đến trên 3.000 km và có rất nhiều cái đô thị ở ven biển. Vâng, thì cái việc hạ tầng đô thị không phát triển chưa đáp ứng như thế thì dẫn đến cái hạ tầng xã hội như là y tế, giáo dục, văn hóa, cây xanh thì đạt thấp so với quy chuẩn. Cái phần triển khai đầu tư phát triển đô thị cũng còn dàn trải. Một số đô thị mới có tỷ lệ sử dụng đất thấp thì gây lãng phí đất đai và nguồn lực. Đối với các đô thị lớn thì không nói, nhưng mà đô thị nhỏ ở Việt Nam thì mật độ dân số trung bình tương đối thấp, chỉ độ khoảng 40 đến 50 người một hectare thôi. Trong khi đó thì mật độ quy định theo định hướng quy hoạch tổng thể hệ thống quốc gia là 95 người một hectare, như vậy là yêu cầu. Vâng, nguồn lực phát triển còn thiếu. Còn về quản lý phát triển đô thị thì chúng ta đều biết có một cái độ trễ ở giữa quản lý và phát triển. Thì có thể nói rằng là năng lực quản lý ở các cấp thì chưa đáp ứng được yêu cầu phát triển rất là mạnh hiện nay của đô thị Việt Nam. Các lý do khách quan và chủ quan ở Việt Nam chúng ta có thể nói rằng là thứ nhất là mô hình tăng trưởng của đô thị chưa đa dạng và tăng trưởng còn thiếu bền vững, tức là còn là tăng trưởng nâu đấy ạ, phụ thuộc vào việc khai thác tài nguyên, sử dụng tài nguyên đất đai chưa hiệu quả, kết nối giao thông còn yếu, làm gia tăng chi phí logistics và dẫn đến ô nhiễm môi trường. Và như chúng ta đã biết thì đô thị là một nơi có nhiều ngành cùng hoạt động trên một cái lãnh thổ hữu hạn về diện tích. Tuy nhiên trong cái đô thị đấy thì chưa thực sự có sự liên kết về hệ thống, còn riêng biệt theo từng ngành và mỗi ngành còn riêng biệt. Ví dụ như ở Việt Nam thì ngay cả trong ngành tài nguyên đến cái ngành mà quy hoạch đô thị của chúng tôi thì ngay cả cái hệ thống bản vẽ nó cũng khác nhau rất là cũng gây một khó khăn đi chuyển đổi, mặc dù cái khó khăn nó rất là nhỏ nhưng cũng để thể hiện là cái sự chưa đồng bộ. Vâng, và dữ liệu đô thị là còn thiếu và yếu. Chính vì vậy nếu không có sự điều chỉnh kịp thời thì mô hình cái tăng trưởng các đô thị Việt Nam có thể rơi vào tình huống thiếu bền vững. Và như chúng ta đã biết thì cái sự đầu tư vào hạ tầng đô thị thì nó rất là nhiều, rất là lớn và cái tuổi thọ nó rất là lâu. Cho nên cái việc phục hồi sẽ đòi hỏi nguồn lực rất lớn và thậm chí khó có thể sửa chữa được. Giải quyết cái tồn tại này thì tất nhiên phải bắt đầu từ quy hoạch xây dựng và bên cạnh các văn bản pháp lý thì các đồ án quy hoạch xây dựng các cấp cũng thực sự là một công cụ pháp lý quan trọng. Thì trong đó như chúng ta đã biết là cả NBS là các giải pháp dựa vào thiên nhiên mà hôm nay chúng ta đang bàn ở đây là một trong những công cụ hữu hiệu để quy hoạch đô thị và phát triển đô thị theo hướng tăng trưởng xanh và phát triển bền vững. Vâng, thế thì Việt Nam đã làm những cái gì ạ? Và ý thức rõ được những điều đó thì là các văn bản pháp lý cũ mới ở Việt Nam đều có thể nhắc đến, có thể là không toàn thể nhưng mà đều có đề cập đến các nội dung về ứng phó biến đổi khí hậu, phát triển hạ tầng xanh, ứng phó với thiên tai. Đó là luật quy hoạch đô thị. Chúng tôi có chiến lược quốc gia về tăng trưởng xanh từ giai đoạn 2021-2030 vừa được ban hành xong. Trước đó cũng đã có một chiến lược khác. Và không chỉ có chiến lược của quốc gia về tăng trưởng xanh nói chung, mà riêng về cái đô thị tăng trưởng xanh thì chúng tôi cũng có một chiến lược riêng, gọi là quyết định số 84 năm 2018. Trong đó thì tôi cũng được vinh dự tham gia viết cái dự thảo này. Kế hoạch phát triển đô thị tăng trưởng xanh Việt Nam năm 2030. Điều đó chứng tỏ sự quan tâm rất là nhất mực của nhà nước đến cái việc là không chỉ tăng trưởng xanh cho riêng các ngành mà còn là riêng trong lĩnh vực đô thị. Vâng, ở Bộ Xây dựng chúng tôi cũng có quy định về chỉ tiêu xây dựng đô thị tăng trưởng xanh, có đề án phát triển đô thị thông minh bền vững Việt Nam. Và chúng tôi có riêng một cái đề án về phát triển các đô thị Việt Nam ứng phó với biến đổi khí hậu. có một giai đoạn 1 là từ năm 2013 đến năm 2020 và đã kết thúc. Tuy nhiên trước những cái diễn biến mà rất là phức tạp, rất là khó lường của biến đổi khí hậu thì chúng tôi đã đề nghị báo cáo Thủ tướng đề xuất gia hạn, và Thủ tướng cũng đã gia hạn cho 10 năm tiếp theo, là được cái dự án này còn làm đến tận năm 2030, chứng tỏ là sự sát sao, sự cập nhật, sự cảm thấy cần thiết rất là quan tâm của nhà nước, của chính phủ đối với cái lĩnh vực đô thị ứng phó với biến đổi khí hậu. Đó là những cái điều kiện tín hiệu rất là đáng mừng. Vâng ạ. Tuy nhiên thế thì những cái thách thức rào cản là gì? Hiện nay thì là chúng tôi chưa có một cái định nghĩa thật là cụ thể, rõ ràng, thật là chính thức trong các văn bản pháp lý về cái tiêu chí đô thị tăng trưởng xanh, đô thị ứng phó biến đổi khí hậu nói chung và NBS nói riêng trong quy hoạch phát triển đô thị, và cũng chưa được lồng ghép chính thức trong các quy hoạch đô thị. Mặc dù đã có những hướng dẫn và thực hiện được xây dựng như một phần của chương trình dự án thí điểm, tuy nhiên các cái tiêu chuẩn, quy chuẩn kỹ thuật chính thức thì hiện nay vẫn đang trong giai đoạn tiến hành. Ví dụ cá nhân tôi đã hợp tác cùng với Viện Tăng trưởng xanh toàn cầu và được sự chỉ đạo của Cục Phát triển Đô thị thực hiện một cái dự án là lồng ghép tăng trưởng xanh vào trong quy hoạch chung đô thị tại các thành phố vừa và nhỏ, với cái case study là ở thành phố Trà Vinh ở đồng bằng sông Cửu Long. Tuy nhiên nó là một cái dạng thí điểm thôi, chưa có hướng dẫn chính thức ạ. Và chính vì vậy chưa có chính thức cho nên chưa huy động được các nguồn lực cần thiết để triển khai trên quy mô lớn, quy mô trên toàn quốc. Và nếu như là cái việc lồng ghép tăng trưởng xanh và NBS đấy không được cân nhắc từ đầu trong quá trình lập quy hoạch thì dẫn đến việc phát triển đô thị theo hướng bền vững thì có tất nhiên cũng gặp nhiều khó khăn, thì chúng ta đều có thể hình dung ra được. Vâng, thì theo hướng chung thì Việt Nam chúng tôi vẫn tiếp tục hăng hái nỗ lực tiến hành các cái công việc đó, và đồng thời cũng rất muốn học hỏi các kinh nghiệm của các quốc gia đi trước cũng như các tổ chức quốc tế, và đó là lý do chúng ta ở đây, đúng không ạ? Thì nhân tiện tôi cũng xin được gửi lời cảm ơn đến Ngân hàng Thế giới và chính phủ Úc và cùng với ICEM. Vâng, tuy nhiên cũng có một điều nhỏ tôi muốn chia sẻ với các đồng nghiệp ở tiểu vùng sông Mekong, là bên cạnh những cái kỹ thuật mới, các quan điểm hiện đại trên thế giới, thì chúng ta là các nước cư dân nông nghiệp Đông Nam Á đã sống hàng nghìn năm nay với cái nền văn minh lúa nước đó, thì chúng ta có cái cách sống thân thiện của các cư dân lúa nước từ trong hàng nghìn năm nay, gắn với thiên nhiên này, gần gũi này, luôn luôn đối xử rất là mềm mại, là bạn của sông nước. Giống như Việt Nam có một cái câu từ ngàn đời, đó là sống chung với lũ ở đồng bằng sông Cửu Long đấy ạ. Và cái việc là các luôn luôn sống trong các không gian mở ở trong nội thất cũng như nơi công cộng, thì tôi nghĩ rằng đó phải chăng cũng chính là NBS, là các giải pháp dựa vào thiên nhiên. Và tôi nghĩ rằng là các nước Đông Nam Á chúng ta đều đã có những truyền thống sống và nương tựa vào tự nhiên, và vấn đề hiện nay là chúng ta tìm cách phát huy cái tinh thần đó lên trong điều kiện mới, trong cái sự phát triển khoa học công nghệ mới, trong cách mạng tin học 4.0 mới ạ. Vâng, đó là tất cả những gì mà tôi muốn chia sẻ. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn mọi người đã chú ý lắng nghe.
Thanks again, Madam, for your very important and helpful remarks from Vietnam. Clearly, there's a lot going on there. Tony, did you have a very quick remark to Vietnam from what you heard? Thank you.
Look, I don't have too many remarks other than perhaps that there are many opportunities, and some of the examples shown here are symptomatic of the opportunities of just simply rethinking how you would reconfigure or adapt existing parklands and open space for much more ecological functions. I think everything I hear is really consistent with that message.
Thanks, Tony. We'll have to have you back with Ben and Jianbin and the rest of the team here in the days and months ahead. Now, colleagues, can we please fly swiftly to Lao PDR, where our colleague, Mr. Vilakone, is joining us from the Department of Climate Change. Now, this moderator hasn't been too good at keeping time, so I must ask Mr. Vilakone to help me and keep his remarks to within 5 minutes. And because I am then after that moving to Dr. Wishart from the World Bank. Mr. Vilakone, welcome. And can you share us some experience and aspiration from Laos? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. John Dore. First of all, I would like to apologize that our Director General of department could not join this event. However, dear Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for invitation and give me this opportunity to speak briefly on initiative of the Monterey on nature-based solutions. As we know, climate change is a global concern issue. It's affecting all sectors like agriculture, water resources, health, and so on. And Laos is also a most vulnerable country to climate change. And the country has already been affecting climate change with it increasingly frequency and intensity of extreme rainfall that leads to the severe flooding in the cities. And you may know that the cost of flooding in 2018 is cost around 372 million USD. And a recent study by the UNEP and the Environmental Health Institute, the EPI, shows that the urban area in Vientiane has increasing by 20% between the year 1990 and 2020, whereas the city has lost 46% of forest cover during the same period. And currently, the infrastructures planning and development in Laos are done with less considering the climate projection. Moreover, the traditional drainage system are inadequate in reducing flood damage under the climate change conditions. For initiative in Laos to address the increasing risk of flooding related with climate change, our government has been working towards an integrated approach for urban development on applying the nature-based solutions to enhance climate resilience. The government has prepared several climate-related policies that including the National Adaptation Program of Actions, National Adaptation Plans, National Climate Change Strategies, Decree on Climate Change, and the National Strategy on Disaster Risk Reductions. There are few ongoing initiatives and projects focusing on urban resilience. The first one we are implementing is the building resilience of urban population with ecosystem-based solutions in Laos. This project funded by the Green Climate Fund, the GCF, and this project aims to shift the paradigm of urban flood management in Vientiane, Bolikamsai, Savannakhet, and Champasak provinces from a limited hard infrastructures approach towards innovative use of ecosystem-based solutions and integrated flood management approach that enhance the climate resilience. This project will develop and mainstream the integrated climate resilience flood management strategy and system-based adaptation in planning framework, and will implement a small-scale urban ecosystem-based adaptation, the EBA, to increase effect of flooding, like we do ecosystem-based restoration and permeable pavement installation as well. The other project is the building climate resilience of urban systems through ecosystem-based adaptation in the Asia Pacific. This project funded by the Global Environmental Facilities, the GEF. This is the regional projects. This project is to build the climate resilience and adaptive capacity of poor urban communities living in the cities, Asia Pacific regions, and the target city in Laos is Sai district of Udom Sai province and Phong Sali district of Phong Sali province. This project has three components. First one is about the institutional strengthening and capacity building. Second one is EBA demonstration in 2 target cities. And the third one is about the knowledge sharing of awareness raising of the EBA. At the moment, this project, we are in the process of selection of EBA interventions based on the result of the climate change vulnerability assessment, BA, in the 2 target cities. Key challenge for implement the project in Sai and Phongsali district. We have quite limited census data for developing the data of vulnerability assessment, and those data also is unsystematic data records and different data platform as well. And the diversity of any group in that 2 target city and with their original language is cause our communication is challenging. And the climate change and ecosystem-based adaptation are the new concept. So we have to do more on awareness about it, and funding available is limited. And the conclusion,
yeah, okay, please.
I would like to reiterate that the government of Laos is committed to UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDG, to address the socio-economic and environmental challenges in Laos, including the climate threats. The government has already promulgated several climate-related policy and programs and has started initiatives on integrated ecosystem-based approach, low carbon development initiative, building back better and circular economy for sustainable city development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vilakone. I think in a brief amount of time that we allowed you, you were able to sort of show us quite a lot of what is happening in Laos. And I do hope that you and your colleagues can share more of that sort of through the workshop in the different sessions where there's a little bit more space. But many thanks for your contribution. Now,
thank you.
Last but not least, and I apologize to him in advance, I'd like to pass to Marcus Wishart from the World Bank and invite him to make his contribution. And apologies to the organisers that I'm taking you to the break a little bit later than you planned. What can I do? So please, Marcus, give us your 5 minutes or so remarks, and just give us a bit of a steer as to where you hope we go in this conversation through the workshop. And I presume you're also going to give us some reflection on the very interesting work that many of you are involved in China. Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, thanks very much, John, and thanks again to the organisers for the opportunity to be able to participate in such a distinguished lineup on the panel this morning. I'm acutely aware of the time constraints, so I'll just make a couple of very quick remarks in relation to some of the work that we've been doing in collaboration with the Development Research Centre here in China, with support from colleagues from the CRC for water sensitive cities over the last couple of years. That is very much aligned with the ongoing initiatives in both Thailand and Vietnam. That's the subject of the discussion. This is focused on some of the broader aspects around valuation and the values associated with water, coming out of some earlier work that the World Bank co-led with colleagues from the UN around the high-level panel on valuing water. And this outlined a number of principles that I think are very much embodied in some of the comments that have been made this morning, in terms of looking not only at the integration of nature-based solutions, but also some of the benefits that can be derived from those. And then the challenges also in trying to translate some of those economic benefits into financing and funding opportunities to be able to take what we all appreciate is proof of concept around the integration of nature-based solutions to scale across the urban landscapes. I think China is a very interesting illustration of some of the challenges, I think, that's facing a number of urban areas in the region. when we look at the rapid pace of social and economic development over the last 30 or 40 years, we've seen per capita income increase from sort of $200 in the 1980s to about 10,000 today. But with that, we've also seen rapid rates in the increase of urbanization from sort of 15-16% in the late 1970s up to 60-70% today. And so we've got these aggregated urban environments, which have already been highlighted in some of the earlier presentations, and the challenges that that brings with it. I think what we also see is that there's increasing exposure to economic losses, both with that increasing prosperity within the urban space, but also in terms of the development of some of the associated infrastructure. And so concomitant with that, we've seen an evolution in sort of the human relationship with that urban space, and particularly as it relates to water and flood management. And so in China, there was initially a heavy emphasis on the notion of flood protection, sort of more than 400,000 or 500,000 kilometers of flood control structures that have been put in place over the last 40 or 50 years. But we've seen that that traditional approach to grey infrastructure isn't sufficient. And so there have been a series of sort of subsequent initiatives that have transitioned away from the conventional approaches around flood protection to a more integrated approach around flood management, looking then at a phase of sort of improving community resilience through emergency preparedness and so forth. And then really in the 2000s towards integrated planning that we've heard about today. And that culminated in the launch in 2014 of the Sponge City Initiative, which really builds on a number of the principles around nature-based solutions. And here the government's committed to have 80% of the urban areas sort of quote unquote sponge-like by 2030 as one of the key contributions, I think, to the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly number 11, that has an emphasis on inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable cities. And a number of opportunities to go in parallel with that in terms of addressing some of the issues Tony highlighted around social equity, poverty, and improving the quality of life, particularly for low-income communities in those urban areas. In the Chinese context, the government estimates somewhere in excess of $1 trillion is required to be able to fulfill on these targets. And that raises the last point that I'd like to just highlight. I think it's been alluded to, but not necessarily made explicit, and that's the challenge of securing sufficient funding and financing to be able to take a number of these sort of demonstrated technologies to scale. I think when we look at the cost-benefit profiles associated with the traditional nature-based solution, very different to perhaps the conventional grey infrastructure. So a smaller scale, more distributed, also has a very different risk profile associated with the types of investments, and also different implications in terms of long-term operation and maintenance. And so we need to make sure that those costs, as well as the benefits, are both fairly and equitably distributed across the various different beneficiaries, to ensure that they're both taken to scale, and also to ensure that they're sustainable. I think with this, when we look at the experiences, not only with the Chinese context around the sponge cities, but some of the experiences that we've heard today coming from other parts of the Mekong region, but also in terms of the Australian context and some of the tools that have been developed and applied, I think there's a great opportunity to be able to look at how better to capture, well, first to identify and capture some of those benefits that are derived from the integration of nature-based solutions. And then more importantly, to be able to look at what are the appropriate types of funding and financing mechanisms that can be put in place. I think this is one of the key pillars for the World Bank strategy in terms of supporting our shareholders and also those countries in the Mekong region as we go forward. So very much looking forward to continuing the discussion today and tomorrow, and also as we move forward into the subsequent phases and trying to support the implementation of some of the tools and techniques that we're going to look at in more detail this afternoon. Thanks very much, John. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. Very much appreciated. So, colleagues on the line, we've had a brief tour of nature-based solutions and climate-resilient urban development in urban spaces from Australia, but then to the Mekong, and moving moving upstream, if you like, from Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and finally some remarks from Marcus giving examples of the work in China. So thank you, Dr. Phirun. Thank you very much, Excellency Chann Sinath from Cambodia. Thank you, Madam Thu Ha, Mr. Vilakone, and finally, thank you, Dr. Marcus, for your contributions. Very much appreciated. I now pass back to the organisers. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Katharine Cross. I work for the Australian Water Partnership as the Mekong Coordinator based here in Bangkok in Thailand. So I would like to thank you for joining us for this next session. In the previous panel, we heard about the vision and strategies around nature-based solutions for climate resilience, as well as linkages to global goals, including the SDGs. In this panel, we will have an opportunity to hear from respected experts providing practical insights on opportunities and challenges in applying nature-based solutions for climate resilient urban development. We will hear how to turn vision into action through approaches such as partnerships, business cases, and pilots. We have 4 distinguished panel members with extensive experience that will be speaking today. So I will first introduce the panel members. Firstly, we will have Dr. Niramon Serisakul, who is with the Urban Design and Development Center in Bangkok, which she is a co-founder and director of. This is a deliberative platform to engage a wide range of stakeholders in the city. And she has led on numerous projects, including the Chao Phraya Sky Park, Bangkok 250, and Good Walk, Thailand. She also collaborates with various institutes across the globe, including most recently in France. Our second panelist today will be Dr. Sokhem Pech. He is the Senior River Basin and Climate Change Specialist and also an advisor to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation in Cambodia. He's an accomplished specialist in public law and policy, diplomacy and international development, and in transboundary river basin governance and climate change. He has over 30 years of experience working at senior management level across Cambodia, the Mekong region, Asia, and North America. Our third speaker will be Dr. Shelley Mc Millan, who is the Senior Water Resources Management Specialist in the Sustainable Development Division for East Asia and the Pacific of the World Bank Group. She's currently based in Bangkok in the World Bank office there, and she's the cluster leader for the water portfolio in Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand, and the focal point for the Mekong River Basin. And then last but not least, our final panelist today will be Dr. Jianbin Wang. He is the Chief Innovation Officer at Water Sensitive Cities in Australia. He is collaborating with researchers and practitioners from multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral backgrounds, translating research into practice and providing transformative responses to emerging urban challenges. He has worked extensively with governments, industry, and research institutions and has implemented over 30 on-ground demonstration projects across Australia, China, Singapore, and Israel. Each panel member will have a 5-minute statement, and they're going to address a range of issues, including opportunities and challenges facing urban development in this region, examples of application of nature-based solutions in urban areas and lessons learned, and then also what are the constraints and what can accelerate scaling up of nature-based solutions as part of climate resilient urban development. I would just like to note, if there is enough time for questions, we will we'll have those. In the meantime, please put your questions in the chats, and we'll endeavor to have a question and answer session. So with no further ado, we will start with Dr. Niramon. I'm just noting Dr. Niramon will not turn on her camera, but she will share her screen. So the floor is yours, Dr. Niramon.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me here. I'm sorry that there's a technical problem that I could not open my camera. So actually, as Katharine kindly introduced me, I belong to UDDC Urban Design and Development Center, Chulalongkorn University, and we advocate for livability of the city. We work with in Bangkok City and other big city in Thailand. And I'm sure that I'm the least expert in this field, nature-based solution. And actually I'm here, I'm interested to join because I have a question to ask you as an expert in nature-based solution. So today I would like to just to share my observation and my question. Nature-based solution, idea and reality. So first part, I would like just to share with you what Katharine already introduced, just a quick flash of the project. So this is the example of the project done by UDDC, Urban Design Development Center. So this is the strategic plan to regenerate the part of the city, inner city area where a lot of infrastructure has been invested, but the livability has been a big question. So we work with a lot of approach, for example, participatory design approach, intensive consultation, and data-driven urban design and planning. So the key idea of this strategic plan that we prepare for Bangkok, this is 6 years ago, is to improve livability through walkability, improve the environment by bringing more nature into the city, make it into a better, improve mobility, prioritize the non-motorized, for example, walk and bicycle, because we think it will bring the improvement of economy and living. So we try to synergize all the diverse neighborhood in our city by by reconnecting them. So this is what Katharine has been introduced. This is one of the project that has been tangibly realized. This is Chao Phraya Sky Park. The main objective is to link the west and the east side of Bangkok by improving walkability and to link people and economic and social activities. And so you can see this is a lot of asset located in both sides of the city, but it was very difficult to link, and through this, with this connectivity, it has been improved. So you can see this is actually just a walkway. We use incomplete rail structure and repurpose it into a walkway for, non-motorized mobility and urban space to sit and to observe the view. And also this is the main objective is to improve the mobility, but take this as an opportunity to add the nature and the green into our proposal, into our design. And this is the momentum has been bigger and bigger from the success of Chao Phraya Sky Park. So now we move to a more central area. This is a CBD where Chulalongkorn located. So this is a green bridge that we have been consult with Australian Embassy. This is the idea is just to connect the two CBD strip, Withayu and Asok, and also two public parks and also the community behind under the bridge. So again, the idea is to bring more nature into the design, into the underused concrete structure. But my question is, can we call this as a nature-based solution? So what's the difference between bringing more nature into our design, into urban space and the nature-based solution. So this is the question that I would like to ask you to comment and to discuss. So this is repurposing the stagnant canal and make it into a nicer learning space. So this is my question: bringing the nature into the urban environment and the nature-based solution, is it the same thing? So my question is that when the nature-based solution, which is quite new, and I don't think it's already well established in, for example, in my country, and it's very new, both to academic field and also to authority and design field. So what is a clear definition of the nature-based solution? Is there any a set of the design criteria to differentiate what I just show you? And what is the set? Is there a set of evaluation criteria of the result? And what is the proportion? The proportion of the nature. How can we call this is a nature-based solution? The proportion between nature solution and artificial solution. And is there any concrete research and application in the urban context? Because I think in the urban context, there's a lot of limitation, limit of the space, and the limit of the nature, the type of the nature that we can bring into the context of the city. For example, this is just the opportunity for me to really study what is really a nature-based solution. This is a canal project, just located in front of my house. I live here. So this is called Chong Non Si Canal Improvement, and it's really ongoing. The project is initiated by BMA, Bangkok City Administration, and they promise this canal to be the best practice of the nature-based solution with quite a big budget, $30 million US. And you can see there's a lot of good idea: porous pavement, porous lane, vertical infiltration, breathing wall, rain garden. So the first time I saw this is all a very good idea, but how can they really apply it in the middle of the city, Sathorn district? For example, this is the detail that they promise to be the best practice of the nature-based solution. As you can see, this is a small canal, just 15 meters width, with 4 kilometers long. So with the polluted water, as I think you all know, how polluted water in the Bangkok Canal and the air here in our city. But this proposed to use a nature-based water treatment. I wonder how possible, because they said this is this project to compare to Cheonggyecheon in Seoul, but in Seoul, in Cheonggyecheon, the BOD, for example, the water quality, they really reduced from 20 milligram per liter to 2 milligram per liter that people can touch and expose to the water. And they never claim it to be the nature-based. They really use artificial system. But this project in the middle of Sathorn CBD district claim to be how to say, the best practice of the nature-based solution. So I would like to ask you, what is the fine line to differentiate what is a nature-based, what is a artificial based solution, and this is it how to say possible really? I asked you for the expert. For example, this is just a water treatment, and this canal, Chong Non Si Canal, actually it was originally designed to be the drainage function. And if this project, the new design, as they claim to be the nature-based solution, block the water like this, are you going to call it the nature-based solution? like this, and plus the rain garden, very fashionable. But for Bangkok sidewalk, I think to have a good sidewalk with enough, maybe it is more a more higher priority than to have a rain garden sidewalk if you don't have a large quantity underground water reservoir below the sidewalk. So this is all this is like the claim, and I would like to know, is it possible for this? And when you see the nature-based solution, what you only see is the giant concrete platform cover over the canal. This is do you have a criteria to differentiate between what is the nature-based and what is the artificial based solution? I think it's very important for us because it's very new and nobody know about it, and I think the city authority is ready to adopt, and as you see, it's not cheap. The budget is very high, and if the nation if the project that claim to be the nature-based solution have removed all the existing tree, this is 30 years trees, and replaced by the trees from nowhere, like from different, totally different ecology, like you can see, this is the trees bring from the swamp forest ecology into the middle of the Bangkok CBD. Can we still call it a nature-based solution? Are they going to survive?
Thank you.
Yes, I'm finishing. And if it survive, if the maintenance cost is very high, do you have like the criteria to evaluate this like this? So I think I would like to ask I asked before. Okay. The clear definition, yes, the clear definition of the nature-based solution, the set of the design criteria, a set of evaluation criteria of the result, and what is the borderline between the nature-based and artificial-based, because I think it's very important if you would like to introduce this concept into, for example, in the Thai context or in the developing country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Niramon. These are really important questions, and I know that you have to go soon. So actually before, and I'm sure our other panelists will probably reflect on some of this, I'll just ask Tony, I've asked him to comment just brief 30 seconds on some of the questions that you've asked. Tony, would you be able to say briefly?
Look, very quickly, first of all, I think the questions are very, very good questions and are very important questions that really question whether we are greenwashing our city or we are truly bringing ecological functions to our city. So it all comes down to the performance of those systems and not just looking good. So I give you an example of, bringing nature into the city to increase biodiversity is actually incredibly difficult when you have very long, narrow opportunities with highly dense environment. But in that example you show, if those systems were in fact used to recirculate water from the canal and constantly cleaning that water, then it becomes a nature-based solution in that it is actually providing an ecosystem service that cleans the stagnant water, for instance, that you talked about. So the size of it becomes important. It cannot be tokenistic. And that's why in my presentation, I talk about the importance of having the right technical analysis and modeling to be sure that whatever we build, it is actually providing a meaningful ecological function. In the example you show in there, fantastic piece of urban landscape design, but it doesn't deliver any ecological function unless we can come up with a way of looking at how the canal beneath it can actually be used and cleansed by those Melaleuca swamp that you show. So in itself, the way I look at it, it is just a great piece of urban design, fantastic, but a bit of greenwashing, really. But you can actually get them to function better if we find a way of bringing water from the canal, cleansing it through those natural systems, the Melaleuca systems, and then it can then become a nature-based solution.
Thank you so much, Tony. And as I said, I'm sure our other panelists will also comment on this. So I'd just like to move on with time. So our next speaker is Dr. Sokhem Pech. So Dr. Sokhem, you have the floor.
Thank you, Katharine. Please let me know if you cannot hear me. Last time I spoke for half an hour to a very polite audience. So please don't let me repeat that bad lesson. Yeah, thank you, Katharine, for the question that sent to us in advance. So the first one is about what are the opportunity and lessons or challenges for this kind of adaptation or NBS in the Mekong region. When we're talking about the level of urbanization, our Mekong region, especially Cambodia and Laos, are more than half a century behind the rest of the world. At the moment, the population, like Cambodian population, 25%, roughly 4 million out of 17 million living in the urban area that we define as urban, but sometimes not even close to that urban, according to that definition. And either this lag behind is a blessing in disguise or a curse for us. But for us, I see that urban is both challenge and an opportunity. It permits a country like Cambodia to build economic center of regional and international importance around the cities and townships, especially around within the Mekong floodplain, Mekong deltas, and also along the border with Vietnam and Thailand. That is more like bringing more connectivity. But at the same time, it also allow us to use land more productively, and you create more employments in the cities. But then it comes to the minus side of it, the cost. Yeah, we will see more and more waste generated, solid waste, industrial wastewaters, encroachment into the floodplain, encroachment into more disaster-prone area, and that need to be managed and minimized very well. And why the country still don't have that enough capacity to do so. So for me as a Cambodian, I see that urban development experiences from more advanced countries in the world or in regions will allow us to, especially this NBS solution that the program is bringing to us, allow us to adapt, allow us to learn from them. And we often ask a question about either we had to wait until it's too late and then try to raise a lot of money to rehabilitate, to mitigate the situation. And I really like the early presentation by our Thai colleague about the question about, this is a greenwashing, or you want to do it, adapt it, and building gray and green infrastructure and technology in advance. So see, these are the lessons learned for Cambodia that we can learn more, and we're really eager and we are so delighted to join this discussion today. And one of the biggest challenge for us at the moment now is we need to prepare for ourselves to transit from very rural society to more urban. What would be a smooth transition? What would be the best way of doing it? Those are the questions that we often ask ourselves if we are ready to do it. And then we also later on looking at if we have all the capacity, because the transition taking place when Cambodia especially is facing or enjoying regional integration, globalization, and influx of foreign investment come from different sources, different safeguard standards and others that also generate both opportunity but also very big challenge on how we are going to allow better governance out of this influx of investment, and if they had the capacity to ensure that it will be adequately, robustly access and mitigation measure actually proposed. That's a part of the life, but we admitted that the uncontrolled urbanization coupled with insufficient sanitation infrastructure presenting growing risks, and climate change add another level of risk on it and uncertainty, as most of our cities are built along the rivers, along the river banks, in the floodplain, along the coastal lines, and also along other very sensitive area of fragile ecosystem. And allow me to bring the recent experience from my adopted country, Canada. Now we are suffering from 100-year flood issues. We compare to the rainfall as atmospheric rivers. Like you dump the whole river's water in one specific area in 4 or 5 hours or 12 hours of rainfall. And this all started from 100 years ago when we claimed the lake, the swamp, and turned it into residential and to urban area. And after 100 years of abuse, and then our mother nature tell us that enough is enough. And what are the impacts out of it? The economic loss out of it provide us that not only about turning the city of Vancouver, where my 3 kids are living now, into an isolated island, disconnected from the whole of countries. And Canada, the biggest seaport, just stands still. Hundred of the cargo ship are idly waiting in the ocean. And this not only create this connectivity, disruption to life, but also to the whole value, the whole supply chain in the world. That is the cause. I still remember how the big flood in Thailand actually create this big supply chain issues in terms of computer chip and car spare part and other, how that have impact on the global markets. So this also the lesson learned to us that yes, before that flood, we have big forest fire before, and now we have snowfall, we have hailstorms, not only in Canada, North America, but also in Europe and other places, and also in Asia. So I think that is enough lesson learned, but sometimes we forget to learn and we keep doing business as usual. But I hope that now just go to the last question about, if Cambodia or I myself have been having experience using NBS. To be honest, we have this nature-based mostly solution, mostly for other areas, like abroad, the climate of flood issues, not only in the urban, but focus more on the rural areas. We do it for payment for ecosystem services and other that more along that line. But recently, there are more study. The government have adopted the green growth strategy focusing on green urban development. The government and the ADB in 2012 adopted the urban sector's development and strategy. And I really like the the idea or the issues that they highlighted there. Now, 8 years later, all the issues identified as a bottleneck for smart city, green city, livable city, or sustainable and inclusive city that the Ministry of Environment have been pursuing very hard for the last 10 years or so. That's still there, the problem that we need to address. Cambodia is eager, the policymaker understand the consequences, the problem. But then we have to address the root cause of that, like the issues of, yes, it is more how the coordination, how the cross-sectoral issues, because it's more like we are still very much working on this vertical coordination problem, and the urban issues is more about local, the local government issues, but all the natural funding resources and the decision on infrastructure still made from very centralized level. So decentralization has been in place, but that's the challenge on how you, without jealously guarding the resource and funding from the national, and actually empower the local with technology, with fund, with human capacity to do smart and green and resilient city.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sokhem.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're going to have to wrap up, but thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for especially your reflections on the need to build on experiences from other countries. I think this conference is an opportunity to do that, and I do encourage everyone to take part in day 2, where there will be some case studies from Vietnam and Thailand where you can go into more depth. And also thank you for asking some of the questions that hopefully we can get into, for example, around economics. So on that note, I will move on to Dr. Shelley Mc Millan. So Dr. Shelley, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Catherine. I hope you all are hearing me very well. So I'm just going to follow on a little bit from the opening remarks that our Thailand country manager shared. In particular, if we take a bit of a look at the opportunity that the COVID-19 pandemic poses for us. Yes, I mean, of course, it is quite a menace, but at the same time, I think many people have stated that there's nothing like a crisis to bring opportunities to the table. So in that respect, smart green investments and interventions that have resilience principles built into them can certainly create a triple dividend, helping cities to boost their economies, to improve equity, and also preparing communities for the inevitable climate and health threats. When cities are planned well, urbanization definitely contributes to economic growth and poverty alleviation, as well as to sustainability and climate change mitigation. However, when they are not planned well and we have a lot of unplanned growth, this results in a proliferation of slums, congestion, pollution, lack of affordable housing, poor access to sanitation and waste management, and of course, a lot of vulnerability to natural hazards, which, as we all said earlier today, are exacerbated by climate change. If I look a little bit more closely at what has been happening in the Mekong region, the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in major reflows of migrant workers to their home countries, which is increasing the pressure on housing, service provision, and so on, not just in the cities, but even in the rural areas. Nutrient discharges into water bodies are another challenge, which is at a tipping point. We've seen a lot of algal blooms, fish kills, and these have been, I would say, quite widely experienced in major cities of Mekong countries. So we have a real opportunity now to pause and to build more resilience into things like our urban sanitation systems, where we can reuse wastewater flows. We can also take a closer look at how we can improve the legislation and the regulations related to the use of discharge outfalls. The water supply for several major cities and towns are also at risk of saltwater intrusion because, as Sokhem just mentioned, many of the cities are located in low-lying coastal areas. They rely on shallow aquifers, and we have poor recharge of groundwater systems. But the challenge still remains. How do we now use this opportunity to plan well the recovery post-COVID-19 and truly try to build back better? If we do this, the physical and economic density of our cities can provide the impetus for more infrastructure investment, which combine these gray and green solutions in support of low carbon development. I think we heard lots of good examples already this morning. These include solar street lighting, urban reforestation and vegetation, redefining the use of roads to make them safer, for us to have more use of bicycles, scooters, and circular water economies. And I think we have very good relevant examples right here in the East Asia region, right? Coming from Singapore, from China, from Australia, from which we can learn. But we have to do more to convince the policymakers of the viability of these solutions, both technical and economic viability of nature-based solutions. We also need to find ways to incentivize the uptake of these solutions. And lastly, and perhaps I think, very importantly, we definitely need better collaboration between governments and business in order to share the costs, the research and development, innovation, all the challenges that we see exist in supply chains, and coordination of a global transition to net zero. I think that the sources and the uses of capital for decarbonization, are growing quite quickly, even here in East Asia. And the deployment, and by that I mean sort of the allocation and the project prioritization of that capital, needs to increasingly coincide with a revised framework to embed long-term sustainability and decarbonization in terms of returns on investment, and also in terms of results. And when I say results, I mean examples sort of maintaining natural capital targets, renewable-driven retrofitting of infrastructure, sustainable supply chain input considerations. You can take those into consideration in procurement. We can embed ESG principles into skills and capacity building, so we can ensure that we have a skilled labor market with all these new jobs and things like that. These are some of the actions that I see need to happen more to ensure that this deployment of capital is aligned to a more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable future. We at the World Bank Group, have aligned our financing to support the Paris Agreement. And we have set some clear climate co-benefit targets for our financing. I'll probably stop here for now, Katharine, and I'm happy to share more information about the World Bank Group's climate action plan and how we have tried to align our financing to the Paris Agreement during the Q&A section. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Shelley, for those comments, especially what you highlighted around embedding skills, policy, and financing. And it's good to see leadership from the World Bank in this area. Also, your point about, and I think the previous speakers, that this is an opportunity to build back better, and we can take advantage of that, but we have to proceed with knowledge and using experiences from the region and from elsewhere. So I will now pass to Dr. Jianbin to provide his reflections.
Well, thank you, Katharine, and thank you for all the previous speakers. I think all the previous speakers cover a great points. Maybe one thing I would like to reinforce is that the nature-based solution is not single purpose, it's not single function. In fact, we have seen many applications of NBS all around the globe, ranging from the Israel as a desert country with only 300 millimeter rainfall a year, all the way to Singapore as a tropical country with more than 2,400 millimeter rainfall a year. And with nature-based solutions, they're all helping them to address their country's specific, their unique problems. I'll give you one example. With the constructed wetlands, we can use constructed wetlands to manage flood, but at the same time, it can also be part of a stormwater harvesting scheme. Barrier retention swells, you can use it to mitigate, the drainage, mitigate some of the hydrological impact of urbanization. But it also can be designed as part of a large flood corridor. And on top of that, it can also be used to manage catchment water quality. So it really comes down to how you design them. How can we be innovative enough so that we build the multi-functionality into the nature-based solution so it can tackle multiple challenges. So having said that, when we have a nature-based solution trying to deal with multiple challenges, I think it's very crucial for us to have a system thinking in place, a sort of framework so that we don't shift the problems or cause unintended consequences. For example, the engineers in the past trying to tranquilize major creeks in order to improve the drainage efficiency. But the result is that we're not only losing the biodiversity in those creeks, but we're also creating flooding problems in the downstream. So we are not solving that problem, we're merely shifting that problem away and potentially cause more problems. So that system of thinking is really important. And the experience we have in Australia is that we use the term called integrated water management. It's a framework, and meaning that we're trying to manage the entire urban water cycle in a holistic way. That includes water supply, stormwater drainage, wastewater management, and plus some of the climate extremes such as flood, drought, and urban heat, all in a coordinated and holistic way, so that we're not creating more problems while addressing one problem. So the question is really, how do we get there? And the one of the learnings I really want to share with the group is that we really have to take a multifunctional, take on the nature issue. Then, therefore, we need a multidisciplinary approach, which means that we need more than just engineers to make it work. We need to bring the planners, urban designers, ecologists, architects, land architects all together. And we have to start the process right from the beginning. As Freddie pointed out, was one of the early speakers, that because the further we wait, we will find the window of opportunities will become narrow and narrow. And if we try to add nature-based solutions at a very later stage, we have to compromise a lot of things. And in the end, we probably won't be able to deliver the original design intent. So we won't get the best overall outcomes. So the question is that how do we get started? Maybe a pilot project or demonstration project is a good way to start, because with a pilot project, we not only can test the technical feasibility of nature-based solutions, we can also test how do we get them on the ground in different countries, because every country is different. They have different biophysical conditions. They also have a different social institutional context. And the beauty of pilot projects, it allows us to build so many experimental elements into the project. So we can test them such that we know which one is work, which ones doesn't work. So, and the more importantly, we can start to build local capacities across from policy to governance to practice, all the way to probably research sectors, so that when we know the pilot project is working, we then have all the foundation elements ready for scale up. In this way, we actually build a whole lot of confidence in the whole of society, which is ready for scale up in the future. Maybe just quickly in summary, that I think, first of all, we have to acknowledge the challenges needs to be addressed, whether it's triggered by climate change or Shelley pointed out by the COVID-19. But we have to acknowledge that something needs to be addressed. And to address those issues, we have to change the way we used to plan, design, and develop our cities, because we can't solve a problem with the same mindset that creates that problem. Maybe that's all from me, Katharine, or back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jianbin, and thank you for highlighting some of those important points, especially around the need for a multifunctional, multidisciplinary approach. I think that is clear from some of the questions that Dr. Niramon brought forward to ensure that there is that understanding and common vision when implementing these solutions, as well as the importance of pilots to adapting to local contexts. Now, unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we're not going to be able to have a question and answer session. I do encourage you still to put questions in the chats, and we'll ask our panelists to look at those. So I would like to wrap up this panel. And again, just remind you that tomorrow, if you want to go into more depth on pilots and examples, please join the session tomorrow morning. So thank you so much to all our panelists. Thank you for your important insights, your questions. I'm sure we could have many hours discussion, and hopefully one day soon we can meet in the future and be able to do that. So thanks again. We're going to move on to the next session, which is on integrated urban flood management. And we're going to hear from Mr. Ben Furmage, who is the Chief Executive of Water Sensitive Cities Australia. For the past 25 years, Ben has worked as a regulator, policy advisor, and service provider. Previously, he worked for Melbourne Water, and he has provided executive leadership to a range of functions, including water resource and infrastructure planning, utility regulation, public affairs, sustainability, customer service, research and development. So I would like to pass to Ben for your presentation. Thank you.
Australia is one of the most urbanised countries in the world, and we know that we need to support the continued growth of our urban centres in a way that not only enhances resilience, but also achieves the community's expectations around economic performance, around social inclusiveness and connection, and around the environment on which we all depend. It's also becoming increasingly clear that the large infrastructure investments that have served us well in the past, things like big dams and levee banks, by themselves they may not be enough to deliver the future that we are looking for, and that we need to consider a broader range of options combined in clever ways to deliver a broader range of benefits and respond to a broader range of challenges. And here in Australia, we know that we are not the only ones thinking about these sorts of issues, wrestling with these sorts of challenges, and looking for a better approach. This sort of thinking drove a project between ourselves and the World Bank, where we looked at opportunities for not only responding to flooding, but to unlock broader benefits, particularly through smarter use of nature-based solutions. And we did that in a way that made sure that we valued the contribution of nature-based solutions much more effectively. Thinking about that, we looked at a 5-step process. To unlock these broader benefits, we had to think broader than just the location that we were studying. We had to think about the whole catchment. What is the broader catchment? What are its economic, social and environmental objectives? And how do they interact? We then look specifically at flooding. What sort of flooding issues are we wrestling with here? Is it fluvial, pluvial, coastal, groundwater, or a combination of these? And how does that flooding impact the broader economic, social, and environmental objectives of the catchment? You can see that I'm talking about a broader range of solutions, green, grey, non-structural, at a range of scales, lot, precinct, and even whole of city and catchment solutions. So we really looked as broadly as we could to think creatively about the different combinations of hybrid options that would unlock more community value. We then use benefit cost analysis to compare these different options and come up with a mix that was unique and reflecting of the characteristics of that particular location. And then we also looked at the distribution of costs and benefits between different groups over time and different geographies. Importantly, this wasn't just a theoretical exercise. We looked at a number of case studies, and we also were lucky enough to work with senior policymakers and have those discussions about how do we create that authorising environment for change. And also we got the opportunity to work with technical experts so that the economic and the engineering solutions could bring the vision of the policymakers to practical effect. This work was underpinned by some economic tools called Infuse. So this was mainly about finding ways to make the use of the information that we have to better value the contribution that nature-based solutions can make. With the support of the Australian Government and the World Bank, and in partnership with the International Centre for Environmental Management, and with valuable input from technical experts from both Thailand and Vietnam, we've applied the same 5-step process to 4 case studies, 2 in big cities and 2 in regional areas. An important part of our project was illustrating the flexibility and scalability of nature-based solutions and their capacity to be integrated with existing projects to add more value. In the case of Benjikiti Park in the Sukhumvit area of Bangkok, there was already significant work being done around a very large nature-based solution, the park. Our project suggested some additional measures that could be added, both within the park and around the park, to add more value to Bangkok overall. The additional measures included some small distributed nature-based solutions, things like planter boxes, swales, green roofs, and that they could work in the northern area to also attenuate floods and improve water quality, as well as deliver improved amenity and other benefits, health and economic benefits to the area. So we've got a very large infrastructure asset, the park, working well with much smaller based ones. And the case study also explored how these smaller nature-based solutions could be delivered in partnership with activation of the private sector and collaboration with the local community. We also looked at how a linear nature-based solution, introducing nature-based solutions to a canal to connect both Benjikiti Park and Lumpini Park, so that we end up with an asset that not only improves water quality as well as its existing function of transferring water, but it also provides a means of connecting really 2 important big assets, Lumpini and Benjikiti Park. So we now have a green triangle, if you like, the northern area with small-scale distributed assets, and the 2 large connected parks, which together create a green precinct, which improves water quality, improves the management of water quantity, and also delivers significant broader health, amenity, well-being and economic value to the area and to the broader Bangkok city. I was thinking about green precincts. We also looked at some situations where there weren't any large parks. So, for example, in the rapidly growing city of Rayong, here we looked at the transport network. Is there a way of integrating large and small nature-based solutions into roads, into transport corridors to create some green corridors, not just with major roads, but smaller secondary roads as well, and into the car parks and shopping centres, so that you end up with a connected linear network of nature-based solutions that respond to the particular needs of that location it was a really important commercial area, but it was also quite hot. There was a lot of concrete, so we're introducing green to improve thermal comfort and to create an environment that not only attenuates and treats floodwaters, but also is a fantastic location where people want to go and spend time and spend money as well. As well as these sorts of initiatives, we also looked at a catchment scale. So, for example, sometimes it's more cost effective and more impactful to do works in the top of the catchment rather than in the lower reaches. For example, when we looked at the island of Phu Quoc, we found that it cost less to reclaim land that was largely agricultural, much higher up in the catchment, and rather than to go and purchase land that was peri-urban, much down lower. So it was cheaper, but it also created the opportunity for us to build a swamp forest that could bring in tourist dollars to the inland of the island, where most of its tourism activity is focused on the perimeter of the island. So created an asset that delivered great value when it was dry, but was also there to provide an important flood protection when it was wet. We also looked at some water cycle solutions, so thinking about the important integration of not only flood protection, but also improving water quality. So we're managing water quantity and water quality, creating water supply for non-drinking purposes, and also thinking about the management of sewage and stormwater. So ideally starting to think about how do we separate those two very different qualities of water, different reliabilities of water for beneficial use. We also thought about circular economy solutions, for example, again on the island of Phu Quoc, thinking about how do we not only manage the water cycle, but think about the waste cycle and the energy cycle and start to manage our solid and liquid waste together in a more integrated way that reduces the requirements to bring resources in and improves the local environment as well. The economic analysis undertaken as part of each of the case studies suggested that in all of the case studies, the benefits were greater than the costs. The benefits are shown in the graph in green, costs in red, and the difference between the two is in brown. And while this is an initial strategic assessment of the opportunities in each location, it does provide an indication of the amount of value that is on offer by the strategies proposed. The figures included in the graph are from a whole of community point of view. And these studies really highlighted taking this perspective. When we looked at the value to individual organisations, the case was much more marginal. But when you take a step back and look at the total benefits and the total costs, then the total value to the community was much more clearer. The case studies also highlighted the value of sharing information for strategic decision making. We used local data wherever it was available, but there were some gaps. And by using international benchmarks and drawing on research from other parts of Asia, we were able to come up with estimates of costs and benefits that were fit for purpose for this strategic assessment. Sensitivity testing was also important in this particular approach. Given that it was an initial strategic assessment, we needed to understand which costs and which benefits had the biggest bearing on the result and which assumptions were very important for the result as well. We looked at different time periods, different discount rates, different assumptions and methods for calculating costs and benefits. And in the end, this work enabled us to be confident that our conclusions, even though initial and strategic rather than detailed and forensic, the conclusions were robust. As well as looking at the total benefit to the community, we also looked at the distribution of costs and benefits among different members of the community, among different locations, and over time. This information could provide good data and good information to inform engagement with the public and private sectors to activate them as partners in delivering the proposed methods. It can also provide a good evidence-based discussion around what is a fair and efficient allocation of costs. Or put another way, have a good discussion around who should pay, how much, and when. The 4 case studies have been written up and are available for your review, and we would welcome any comments or questions that you have. The case studies, together with an overarching synthesis report, which attempts to draw out some of the overarching themes and insights and summarise each of the case studies. All 5 reports are available on the project's website and in your conference materials. Our urban communities are continuing to grow. Our climate is continuing to change. And our economic resources are certainly not without their limits, and we need to find ways of making the most of the resources that we have. This project has illustrated the value that nature-based solutions can bring to not only urban flood management, but their capacity to unlock a broader range of community and environmental benefits. The projects have brought together engineering and economics. The engineering has illustrated what's possible, and the economics has started to quantify the value that can be provided. Collaboration has been a valuable part of this project, and we have greatly appreciated the contributions of our colleagues. We hope that these sorts of collaborative projects and these sorts of knowledge exchange events like the one that we're having today can continue, so that we can all work together as we all work to ensure that our communities have the resilience that they need, the environmental, social, and economic outcomes that they expect, and they can get all of that at a price that they can afford. Thank you for your attention today, and I wish you good health and good fortune.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you for providing the context and more depth on the case studies. It has been an excellent learning experience and opportunity for knowledge exchange across Thailand and Vietnam, as well as other countries. Also, I'd just like to mention you'll be able to access more information on these case studies and material from this event at the link that has been provided in the chat. So I'd like to move to the closing, which will be by Dr. Halla Qaddumi. Sorry. So Dr. Halla is a senior water economist in the water unit of the Sustainable Development Division for East Africa and the Pacific of the World Bank. Her experience in the water sector spans water resources management, dam safety, climate resilience, water-related disaster risk management, water supply and sanitation, and irrigation services. She's currently based in Hanoi and is coordinating the World Bank's water portfolio in Vietnam. So thank you. I'd like to pass to Halla.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And it's really a pleasure to say a few words at the closing of this session, this interesting day. So I'll keep them relatively short so that we can stay on time. It has been just a fascinating discussion, full of information, and I hope that you all of the participants have enjoyed it, and will take back with you some food for thought. I just wanted to provide a few highlights of the day. So we heard from a range of senior government representatives and international experts on the topic of nature-based solutions for climate resilient urban development. And the discussions have highlighted the size of the challenges, but also the significant opportunities for action. So Professor Wong started us off today with a keynote that provided reflections on the progressive shift in the role of science and engineering of nature-based solutions through urban design for hybrid green, gray, and community-based solutions that work with and add value to conventional engineering systems, and modeling of performance and economic values that provide the empirical basis for fostering multi-sector collaboration and co-investment. We then moved to a high-level panel that provided insights and reflections on the opportunities and challenges facing urban development in various countries, an overview of the policies and strategies providing vision and direction in the pursuit of more climate-resilient urban development, and examples of actual projects that are providing proof of concept and starting to bring their vision to life. The practitioners panel then provided some practical insights into how to make the most of the contribution of NBS, as well as observations on the critical questions of what is required to transition from pilot projects and proofs of concept to application of NBS at scale. Finally, we just heard from Ben on the integrated urban flood management technical assistance, about how hybrid green, gray, and community-based solutions can provide an effective response to flooding and also add broader value. The technical assistance brings together engineering innovations to show what is possible, as well as providing the economic case for NBS. Now, the work is not just theoretical. The work that Ben described is actually informing the design of a World Bank financed Phu Quoc Sustainable Water Management Project that's currently under preparation. And in fact, I'm going to be flying to Phu Quoc tomorrow to work with the counterpart there to explore how we can better integrate these approaches into the design of the project. We heard about the power of NBS through case studies and on-the-ground initiatives in various countries, including those case studies that Ben described in Thailand and Vietnam. Now, these case studies and the work that is already underway across the Mekong region demonstrates the value of this approach and its potential to be scaled up throughout the region, from Thailand and Vietnam to Laos and Cambodia and beyond. Now, moving to our program tomorrow, we hope and we believe that it will be equally exciting. We will delve deeper into the issues and opportunities associated with scaling up NBS for climate resilient urban development. And in particular, we'll discuss the similarities and differences associated with these sorts of initiatives in major cities and regional centers. So I'd just like to close by thanking the speakers and panel members.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we may have lost Dr. Halla, but if I understand where she was heading with her comments, I think she was just about to thank everyone for their participation today, particularly our speakers, our panelists, and all of you, and as well as our two fantastic chairs for the day, Dr. John and Ms. Katharine. So I encourage you all to join us tomorrow. Today, I hope you've received some fantastic, inspiring and useful information. Tomorrow, we'll come together to discuss it. So today has been about listening and hearing. Tomorrow will be about talking and discussing and sharing our experiences. Together, we start to build our understanding of how we can move from nature-based solutions as an opportunity to a practical reality. Thank you for your attention today, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Stay well and talk to you soon.